Optional upgrades for pool safety covers. If you're shopping for a new pool safety cover, there's a couple of things that you might want to or might need to upgrade on that cover in order to accommodate your pool. Now, the first step in this process is simply deciding between whether you want a light-duty mesh, heavy-duty mesh, or solid cover. Obviously, that's something that you need to decide on. But in addition to that, there's a number of other things that you might need to look at for your cover, and I'm going to run through them all with you right now. So the first one is grid spacing. Most manufacturers will offer you something called 3-foot grid spacing or 5-foot grid spacing on some pools. I'll give you an example. So let's say you had a very basic pool. Let's call it a rectangle, and there's nothing fancy. There's no steps, there's no ladders, there's no slides or waterfalls or anything at all. So that cover could in theory be offered in a 5-foot grid spacing. And what that means is that there will be a supporting strap and an anchor and spring installed on both ends approximately every 5 feet apart. So if you were to take that exact same cover and change it to a 3-foot grid spacing, what you would have is you would ultimately have more anchors that get installed and more straps that are stretching the cover tight in every direction. Well, what's the difference in all this? Well, the 5-foot grid spacing is less expensive because there's less straps and less anchors and less hardware. But the downside is that cover can potentially sag a little bit. Without having as many straps to hold it under tension, it won't be able to resist sagging as much. So typically speaking, manufacturers only offer 5-foot spacing on very small pools, very simple pools, and usually only rectangle pools, usually not free-form pools, because by the time you get into free-form shapes, you really need the strap spacing to be closer together in order to get a good fit on the pool. And one more note on this, when I say 3-foot and 5-foot spacing, and you got your cover and you took out your tape measure and it's not 3 foot, that's 3 foot 6 inches. That's not what you want. These are just rough numbers that the manufacturer uses, and the reality is that the spacing changes depending on the shape of the pool, and that's something that the manufacturer needs to do to make sure that the pool or the cover fits your pool properly. So that's the first optional upgrade, is whether you're going to get a 3-foot spacing or a 5-foot spacing for your grid. And for most people watching this, 3-foot is what you want and also what you kind of have to have. So 5-foot might not even be an option for you. Okay, so the next is the deck installation hardware. This is really important. So what do I mean when I say deck installation hardware? The average pool safety cover is made for a concrete pool deck, because that's kind of what most of the swimming pools have. And included will be these brass grommets that get installed into the deck. Well, what if you don't have a concrete deck? What if you have an interlock stone deck? Could you just use those grommets on an interlock stone deck? Well, you could, and when these pool safety covers first came to the market, that's what everybody did, and it was a total disaster, and that's never something that you want to do. Not only does it look bad, it's not safe. It simply doesn't work. If you have interlocking stones, you need to upgrade that hardware from the stuff that those little brass grommets that come with your cover, and you need to pay extra, and you need to get these great big thick stainless steel stakes that you drive down in between or into the interlock stones themselves after you drill a hole. I think each one of those could cost as much as $20 extra, and you could need 30, 40, 50, or 60 depending on the size of your pool. So that is a hugely appreciable cost upgrade, and something that most people don't realize. If you need to upgrade to landscaping or lawn tubes or interlock stone tubes, it's going to cost you a lot extra money, but there's no way to get around it. You're buying this cover to be safe. Don't cheap out on the hardware and then have something that's not safe to begin with. It defeats the purpose entirely. So the next thing, the next optional upgrade. Well, what if you have a set of steps in your pool? And I'm not talking about vinyl over steel steps that are all within the perimeter of your pool. I'm talking about those white, usually, plastic steps that extend past the perimeter of your pool. If you have those, then a regular cover doesn't fit your pool anymore. You couldn't order an off-the-shelf cover and have it fit your pool. You have to take a custom measurement that includes those steps, because you need the steps to be covered in order to isolate the water. You wouldn't want to cover the whole pool but have the steps be open such that a person or an animal could still fall in to the pool and ultimately access the water. So if you have steps, that means that your cover is going to need to be custom measured, and it also means that you're going to be paying a few $100 extra for the inclusion of that extra panel that they're going to have to sew in to accommodate the steps on your pool. So that's an upgrade. If you have steps on your pool, you're going to have to pay a little bit extra to get that flap made to cover the steps as well. So now let's talk about reduced deck mounting. What is reduced deck mounting? Well, if you have a pool safety cover, one of the first things that you're going to discover is you need to have 3 feet of concrete or pool deck of some kind free and clear around the pool. And that 3 feet accommodates for approximately a foot or so of overlap onto the pool deck of the cover itself, and then a strap, and then the anchor where the anchor gets installed. If you didn't have 3 feet, what if you only had 2 feet of deck? Well, then the cover might not fit properly and you might not be able to get the strap on properly. So does that mean you can't have one of these pool covers? Back when they first came out, yeah, that's what it meant. It meant that your pool was not really suitable for a pool safety cover. But things are better than that now, and most manufacturers offer something called reduced deck mounting. And if you have a situation where some of the deck or all of the deck around your swimming pool is smaller than normal, you can usually pay a little bit extra per strap, and you're going to get a system involved where instead of just a strap and then a spring, the strap actually doubles back over itself, and there's another part sewn back maybe a foot or so onto the cover, such that you can have that same spring mechanism, but it really only physically extends about 6 inches past the edge of the cover itself. So now instead of needing about 3 feet of pool deck, you can probably get away with about maybe 16 inches or so. So that's a big improvement over what it used to be, and an upgrade that you can pay for if you have an area or an entire pool deck that's much smaller than the standard 3 feet. Okay, so what else do we have? Waterfalls. Waterfalls is something that you will definitely be paying extra for if you have a pool safety cover. You can't just ignore that you have a waterfall because it encroaches into the perimeter of the pool, such that if you don't include it in your site sketch for having your safety cover made, the cover is not going to fit your pool. And if there's any place where an animal or a person can still access your water, this defeats the purpose entirely of having a safety cover on your swimming pool. So if you have a waterfall, you're going to take custom measurements to different points along that waterfall, and then the manufacturer will sew in padding such that if you could picture what a pool noodle might look like, a round piece of foam, that's what the edge of your pool cover will look like where it meets your waterfall. There will be hooks that attach that make sure that it will stay where it's supposed to, and then ultimately that foam noodle helps to close the final gap between the edge of where the cover ends and where your waterfall starts. And that really helps to minimize any space that might be left open for even something as small as a squirrel that might get in under there and accidentally fall in and drown in your swimming pool. So the final things that you might encounter for an upgrade for a safety cover is padding. Now, when I say padding, I mean a little bit different than what I was just describing with that foam piece for a waterfall. I'm talking about what if you have a really sharp edge on your coping. Maybe the type of coping stone that you have has a really sharp 90-degree edge, or maybe it's raised up higher than the rest of your pool deck for whatever reason. Well, now, if you had a pool safety cover, if you had snow sit on top of that safety cover and put a lot of weight on it, where the cover is stretching over the edge of that 90-degree pool deck, there's a good chance the cover might rip there because it's a really sharp edge. So if you had a really sharp natural stone edge coping, what you might elect to do is have padding sewn in, which is essentially just a piece of durable plastic that's sewn onto the underside of the cover. From the surface, from the standing on the pool deck, you wouldn't even necessarily know it's there until you flip the cover over and you saw that it wasn't just mesh in those areas, but mesh backed with a piece of pretty rigid rubber plastic material such that it can withstand the constant abrasion of dragging over top of the edge of that sharp corner of your pool deck. And the final thing, the final upgrade that you could potentially get for a pool safety cover, well, what if you have a hot tub directly next to the swimming pool? And usually when you have that, the two plumbing systems are kind of tied together such that the pool and spa are permanently connected and kind of operate in tandem. If one's open, they're both open. If one's closed, they're both closed. So if you have something like that, you can pay extra, and you can have a safety cover that's built to match your pool, then has a bunch of padding sewn on the underside where the cover would reach up and over and also cover the hot tub. So that's a really good option if you have an attached swimming pool and hot tub combination. You can actually get a safety cover that covers both. They're pretty big, they're pretty expensive, they're a little bit of a bear to install every year, but it's still the best option for covering your pool no matter what kind of pool you have. If this information was helpful to you, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can check out my website, swimmingpoolsteve.com.